The SUV tore through the blizzard like a steel ghost, its headlights barely cutting through the swirling snow. The storm wrapped the world in a suffocating shroud, a white void broken only by fleeting shadows of skeletal trees or road signs glimpsed for a heartbeat before vanishing again into the maelstrom. The engine's hum and the muted roar of the wind were the only sounds, a droning soundtrack to their isolated journey. Inside the vehicle, the air was stale and heavy, a cloying mix of wet wool, unwashed bodies, and something faintly metallic, sharp and bitter, like rusted iron. It clung to the back of Jack's throat, mixing with the relentless dryness that gnawed at him. He sat in the middle of the back seat, squeezed between two strangers, his body stiff with discomfort, his head pressed against the icy window, where each breath formed a fragile, fleeting frost. His eyelids drooped, but sleep evaded him. Every jolt of the vehicle on the uneven road rattled through his skull. The vibration of the tires was a steady thrum, a sensation that seemed to seep into his bones. His thirst clawed at him like a living thing, his tongue a rough weight in his mouth. "We should have stayed back at that gas station," muttered the driver, a broad-shouldered man whose name Jack couldn't remember. His voice was tense, cracking slightly under the strain. "Yeah, right," snapped the woman in the passenger seat, her glare sharp enough to cut glass. She twisted in her seat, her hair catching the faint glow of the dashboard lights. "You think sitting there would have been better? Freezing to death?" Jack let their argument fade into the background. It had been a constant since they'd climbed into the SUV, whenever that had been. Time felt slippery, untrustworthy. He couldn't remember where they were going, or even where they'd come from. Every attempt to focus on it felt like trying to grasp smoke. His thoughts slid away, leaving only static behind. The SUV lurched violently as it struck a patch of ice, and Jack's head slammed against the window. The pain was sharp and immediate, jarring him from his stupor. His throat burned as he swallowed against the dryness, his voice rasping out of him like a stranger's. "Do we have any water?" "No," said the woman on his left, a petite redhead with sharp features. Her tone was clipped, as cold as the air outside. Jack's gaze flicked to her, and something about her made his unease deepen. Her face was shadowed, the dim light carving hollows beneath her eyes and along her cheekbones. Those eyes, there was something wrong with them, something too still and too deep. "I'm dying of thirst here," Jack murmured, more to himself than anyone else. The man on his right shifted slightly, his broad shoulders brushing against Jack's arm. He smelled faintly of sweat and engine oil. He didn't respond, didn't even glance Jack's way, just stared ahead into the swirling storm with an unnerving stillness. The minutes stretched into an eternity. The windshield wipers thumped with metronomic insistence, smearing snow rather than clearing it. Jack stared out the window, his gaze searching for anything, a landmark, a sign, a break in the endless void. But there was nothing, just the relentless road and the oppressive storm. "Are we lost?" he asked, his voice breaking the heavy silence. "No," snapped the driver. His hands gripped the wheel with white-knuckled intensity, the tendons in his arms standing out like cables. Jack wasn't so sure. Something about the storm felt wrong, as though it wasn't just weather but a living thing, coiling and twisting around them, tightening with each passing mile. His thirst grew sharper, more urgent, until it felt like his entire body was being hollowed out from the inside. His fingers brushed the seatbelt buckle, its surface unnaturally cold. He flinched, jerking his hand back. The metal felt almost alive, as though it were leaching warmth from his skin. Time became meaningless, a blurry stretch of monotony broken only by the occasional jolt of the SUV hitting an unseen bump. Jack's mind wandered, slipping into strange half-dreams filled with fragmented images, faces he didn't recognize, places that felt both familiar and alien. When he opened his eyes, the storm was still there, unchanged. But the people in the car, they were different, subtly, chillingly so. The redhead's skin looked paler, almost gray, and her lips had taken on a bluish tinge. The driver's reflection in the rearview mirror was shadowed, his eyes sunken into deep hollows. Jack licked his cracked lips. "I need water," he croaked, louder this time. The redhead turned to him slowly, her movements stiff and mechanical. Her face was expressionless, her voice hollow. "There isn't any. You'll have to wait." "For what?" he snapped, though dread curled in his stomach like a serpent. The SUV hit another bump, harder this time, Jack grabbed the seat in front of him to steady himself. His fingers brushed something slick and sticky. He recoiled, staring at his hand. The light inside the vehicle was too dim to see clearly, but the substance clung to his fingers, cold and viscous. Was it blood? Oil? Something else? "We're almost there," the driver said abruptly, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Where?" Jack demanded. No one answered. The realization crept in like a shadow, cold and insidious. There was no destination. The storm outside wasn't a storm at all. The road wasn't leading anywhere. Jack's thirst wasn't just discomfort. It was torment, a gnawing hunger that went beyond the physical. Memories surged up in a sudden, blinding rush. The accident, the screech of tires on ice, the sickening weightlessness as the car skidded off the road, the crunch of metal, the scream of twisting steel. "We didn't make it," he whispered, the words trembling in the air. The redhead turned to him, her eyes black and endless. "There's no getting out," she said softly. Jack's breath caught. He reached for the door handle, pulling with all his strength, but it wouldn't budge. The metal seared his skin with biting cold. He slammed his fist against the window, but the glass remained unyielding, as though mocking his efforts. In the distance, faint headlights appeared, glowing through the storm. Jack's heart surged with a flicker of hope. The vehicle approached, its lights cutting a pale swath through the snow. As it passed, Jack's eyes locked onto its passengers, and his hope turned to horror. They were him. The same face, the same despair etched into their features, staring back at him. The SUV roared on, the engine's hum vibrating in his chest. The arguments resumed up front, their voices blending into a discordant hum. Jack closed his eyes and pressed his forehead against the freezing window. A scream built in his chest, desperate and raw, but he didn't let it out. It would only echo back at him, swallowed by the storm. The SUV roared on, the road stretching endlessly ahead. Thank you for joining me this evening. Before you go, make sure you subscribe and leave a like. If you have an idea for a short, scary story, leave it in the comments below. See you at the next campfire.